and it works. So what I do after I try a few, we'll go and run a computer simulation. And the kind of computer simulation will just randomly put a whole bunch of numbers in here, testing it, and most of the time, and it's going to work. Let's say I put 3.1. Hey, it worked. And then what happens is you build the pacemaker. So you build the pacemaker, a whole bunch of sick people get the pacemaker, and you put it in the pacemaker, and you start putting them in the pacemaker, and people are getting better. You go and get this approved, you're making a lot of money. And then every so often, what happens is this happens. Because it's in a lot of people, you have a lot of heartbeats, you're plugging a lot of numbers, all of a sudden you put F of 3 in here. What happens when this happens is your pacemaker crashes. And when your pacemaker crashes, the person dies. Now the question is this. Okay, person dies. We as engineers go and we look at the pacemaker and go, why did it fail? And we figure out, oh my God, if you put in 3 exactly to here, people die. So what do? There are 3 million people who have this pacemaker in them. Do you do a recall? And do you call all 3 million people into the hospital to have their pacemaker changed out and accept all liability for when those people with the second operation die? Probably not. That's probably not what happens. Probably what happens is your company pays the person not to say anything, and every so often, someone will die. And that's what you got to live with. So you go, that's a pretty little story, Dr. Coy. Does this really happen? And the answer is, yeah, it happens. Happens all the time. I'll even show you examples. Okay, now, whenever you as an engineer are asked, give me a function, you always have to tell the person what values does this function work for. Okay? The domain is any real number except 3. Now, we haven't done any homework problems yet. I'm just trying to explain what this means. Why I'm going to really stress domain on you. Your job as a programmer, as an engineer, is always, here's the function that makes this work. Here's the number where it doesn't work for. You're always telling someone, the most important thing isn't, does this function work? The most important thing is, when does it not work? Because that's when you have to error check. That's when somebody dies. So if I gave this to my boss and he built a pacemaker and a whole bunch of people died, it's my fault. If I give this to my boss and he makes 1 million pacemakers, you know what happens? It's his fault. Picking the right domain is the only way an engineer can protect themselves from liability. Here's my function. Here's where it works. Okay. Now, let me give you a cute little story. GM, right? GM, big giant car company. They made a lock for their key, their ignition key. And what happened was this was a little bit too big. Now, when you build a prototype car, when you have keys, you don't have anything hanging on it. It's a prototype car. That key is very special. So we don't have like pictures of our grandkids on it. It's just the key. You run it and the car goes. So they ran it in simulation and it worked. Now what happened was they went and built millions of these cars. And what happens is, let's say you're a custodian and you have this on a ring of a whole bunch of keys because you have a key to every classroom on this college. Or let's say you're a grandmother and you have a picture of all your grandkids on here. And then let's say that you're driving your car and you hit a bump. Okay. What happens is the key becomes like a seesaw and it goes down like that. So you no longer have contact. So then what happens? Well, your engine dies. Now that's bad. It's not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that happens is you have power steering, which means you can't turn. So whatever is in front of you, you're going to keep going straight. The other thing that happens is you have power brakes. So when the engine dies, you can't turn and you cannot stop. You cannot slow down. You're going to hit exactly what's in front of you. Now, hopefully it's a bush, but it could be a person, it could be another car, it could be a cliff. And you go, oh, Dr. Kai, how many times did this happen? Roughly 30 that GM admits to. GM paid off 30 different people who died from this and said, hey, we're going to tell you about this, but you can't tell anyone about this ignition. And they kept building the same car because if you change the ignition, people know that that ignition is not safe. So they kept putting it in every GM car. And they go, well, how many people do they think died? The estimates are about 300 people. They haven't admitted to 300 people, but it's about 300 people. So you go, so GM got in trouble, right? You're like, no, they ain't in trouble. What happened was they hid this until we had the recession. And then we had the Great Recession, and then we had the GM was going to go out of business, and Obama gave GM a whole bunch of money. He saved GM. It's one of the big political wins for Obama. So he went and saved GM, gave them a lot of money. But when you have a company that is about to die, they have wronged a lot of people on the way of almost dying, right? There's a lot of people that they haven't paid. So when the government goes and say, we're going to save this company with a bailout, what they do is they give them legal protections. This money is from the taxpayers and it's supposed to go to GM employee salary. It's not supposed to go to anything else. It's not supposed to go to lawsuits. So to protect that money that it goes to workers is they go, we're going to give legal protection against GM. If you have a lawsuit for GM, you can't sue them. And GM went, woo! Just so you know, for the last 5 years, we've been killing people. In fact, there's 30 people we killed, but we've got these 300 other lawsuits that are out there. So guess what, guys? Sorry, I've got protection. Now, the next thing they did after they announced this is they fired the CEO, but gave him a ton of money. And then they hired a female CEO. And they said, look, we fired this female CEO, didn't know about it. And she's the only female CEO that has ever been hired. So if you attack GM, it's because you are anti-woman. Right? We're woke. So this happened, right? You're seeing the same thing happen with the Boeing, where they have the Boeings were crashing a few years ago. They knew that was happening. What happens is when the plane has a certain pitch, the autopilot turns off. Now, they knew that this happened, and when they were testing it, they trained the pilots that when this happens, you have to take over, be ready for it. And what happens is they didn't tell other people. So when other people from foreign airlines were flying it and it hit that pitch, the autopilot would go off. They weren't ready for it, and then they would die. In fact, everyone in the plane would die. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm going to stress domain is that if you screw this up, right? If you screw this up, when you run your simulation, it fails. So that's good. If I give you a formula and it fails, we don't build the car, nobody dies. If you screw this up, I mean, think about how many real numbers there are, right? Think about how many real numbers there are. Only one of those numbers kills someone. So this will work in simulation. This will work when you prototype it. This will work for the first 100,000 patients that you put the pacemaker in. But then what do you do after that? So anytime I mention domain, it is on the test. I have no patience for an engineer who gives me a formula and does not give me a domain. That person is dangerous. That person is going to kill somebody. As a programmer and an engineer, your responsibility is not to kill someone with your math. Okay? And this is a real life thing. I mean, this thing happens constantly. And usually during a class, you'll hear about some kind of failure, and then I'll follow up on the sort of story about it. And at the end of the day, the issue is domain. This key works most of the time, except when it doesn't. Now, not only did GM say, hey, this is not our fault, they released the name of the two engineers who designed this keychain, and they said, we didn't kill your family, these two engineers did, go sue them. Okay. So let's talk about domain and let's talk about range. All right, I'm going to share a screen with you guys. There's another way to sort of look at domain and range. Okay. Now, the other reason why I really sort of push on this is that domain and range functions are just normal vocabulary in business. Okay. So in any business, I don't care whether it's a bank or you're working on some equity initiative or psychology or sociology, you're going to have a graph. Okay. So let's say we have this graph over here. Okay. Now, let me, so when we look at this graph, this is the graph of IBM. Now, what the range is all of the X values. So you could be in a meeting and then your boss goes, what's the range? And you would say, oh, this is for the last year. See, this is from, I'm sorry, what's the domain? This is from June 22nd, 2019 to June 22nd, 2020. So the domain is all of last year. And then the next question is, okay, what's the range of my stock? So the domain is from here to here, and the domain of my stock is how high was the stock, how low was the stock? Well, we could see it here. The high was 22.50, the low was, what, is that right? Oh, here we go. The 58-week high is 58, let's call it $59. And the low was probably around here. The low was, let's call it $90. Okay, so let me erase this. Okay, so the range is $90 to $90 to we said $159. Okay. Now, when we use function notation, we're saying at a particular moment, what was the cost of the stock? So let's say I was to ask today, right here, okay? On So this function, IBM, on June 22nd, 2020, how much did my stock cost? It cost about $122. The reason why we name it, right? The functions have a name. The reason why we name it is that I may want to know what is the cost of Apple at the same time. Right? So the nice thing about functions is that if I have multiple graphs, this tells me at this moment, this is what the cost of my stock is. And at this moment on a different graph, what the cost of it, which is why the name of the functions are different. They're associated with a graph. Okay, so let's make sure we're on the same page. Okay, so from, let's see.
Professor.
Uh-huh.
So domain and range, like if we wrote it out in like a sentence form, would you say that like at any given point between June 22nd, 2019 and June 22nd, 2020, the stock was between $90 and $159?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then if you go, well, what was the stock on June 23rd, 2020? You're like, I don't know. Hasn't happened yet. It's not in my domain, right?
But I could tell you all other dates between the two.
Right. The only dates I'm responsible for are from here and here.
Okay.
Okay. So domain is left to right. And the range is up and down. And then if I ask you at a certain point, let's see here. Get rid of that one. This right here, that's my f of 6, 22, 20. Right? That's my function. The cost of my stock at that moment is 122. Okay, so I just want you to know that what this basic vocabulary is. You might be in a meeting and you'll have your boss and you'll be giving a presentation. Your boss will go, what's the domain on that graph? And when you want to be able to just read the bottom of the graph. You don't want to go and go, what does the word domain mean? Right? You don't want to do that because that will happen in a meeting. Okay. So let's look at the different ways in which we can attack domain and range. Oh, one more thing. Okay. I want you to notice that there's only one value at every time period, meaning that let's say I were to call my broker and say, I'd like to buy IBM right now. How much does it cost? And my broker asked me, are you gay? And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, you're not supposed to ask that question. He goes, well, are you white? Are you black? Are you married? Are you a girl? Are you a guy? You're like, hey, I'm just asking for the stock. Now, the reason why that makes that question would make us uncomfortable is that stock is supposed to be one price. Whether I'm gay, whether I'm white, whether I'm black, whether I'm Asian, whether I'm a guy or whether I'm a girl, that stock should cost $122. So understand that for some applications, there's a requirement that at one moment there is only one price. If the graph had looked like this, or it diverged, right? And we go like that. And then we were to say, So 6, 22, 20. We're going to say that is roughly $100. Okay. So what if I told you that this is the cost for a woman, and I were to tell you this is the cost for a man. Okay. So understand that this is illegal. We're not allowed to do this. We're not allowed to have a separate cost for women for men. So whenever we look at stock, there's only one price. You never get this situation where if I draw a vertical line, or if I draw a vertical line, I hit the graph twice. This is called the vertical line test, meaning that for things that are functions, there can only be one price at one time. I'm not allowed to have different prices for different people. That's illegal. Okay. All right. So we call this the vertical line test, where I draw a vertical line, and if I hit the graph more than once, we're doing something illegal. Okay. So let's go and sort of put all this together and say, hey, Dr. Coy, what the heck's on my test? Let's talk about that. So I'm going to write down a whole bunch of definitions. You don't have to know what they mean. Let's just write them down and then we'll talk about it. Okay. All right. Yeah. Domain is the set of all x values. Just copy them. We'll explain them in a second. Range is the set of all y values.
Professor?
Uh-huh.
Quick question. So when doing a vertical line test, if it crosses the graph twice, is that an automatic undefined like solution set?
No, what we do is we're going to say that that is not a function.
Oh, not a function. Okay.
Yeah. So what will happen is we're going to talk about some. Well, I'll explain it. Let me just have you guys copy it. We're going to get there. So you're asking the right question. Okay. A relation is a set of points, and a function is a relation where the x values do not repeat. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy that, and then we'll talk about every piece of it. Okay. So the first word we got to care about is a set. What the heck is a set? A set is a list. Oh, let me get rid of that. That doesn't work. Okay. So a set is a list, right? It's a list. That's all it is. So a relation is a list of points. Okay. So let me make two relations. The way I signify the beginning of my set is I use curly braces. So that's the beginning of my list. And I'm going to give you something like this, and then like this. And then over here, I'm going to give you both of these are relations. It's a list of 3 points. So anytime you have any graph, any shape, it's the most general. It's the most general way you can describe a graph, right? A graph can be a line. A graph can be a bunch of points. A graph could be things that are discontinuous. A graph can a graph can have any shape. All of these graphs are relations when you look at them as a whole bunch of points put together. So the relation is the most general way we can describe a graph. That's a bunch of points. No particular order, it's just a bunch of points. Okay. So the next question is the domain. Now you can either write it like this, or you can write it like with curly braces. It's a list. What are all my x values? Yeah, 2. Yeah, 3. You don't have to repeat the same thing. So if someone asked you, what kind of pets do you have? And you go, I got a dog and a cat. You wouldn't answer by going, I got a dog and a cat and a cat and a cat, right? It would sound weird. You would just say, oh, I've got dogs and cats. Okay. Now the range here.
Professor?
Sure.
Is it correct to say that when you list the domain and range, it's always from least to greatest?
No, it could be any order.
Any order, okay.
Any order. So it's not like a point where this 2 means the x and that means y. Any order is fine. And that's the difference. That's why when you have a point like this, we called it an ordered pair, meaning that there's 2 of these and the order matters. The nature of a list is the order doesn't matter. So if I told you to go to the market and then go get me bacon and tomatoes, and you got me tomatoes and bacon, you're okay. So then the range is either 0. Now I'm going to purposely change the order because the order doesn't matter. Or you can write it with curly braces. Now your teachers may ask you to write it from smaller to greater because it makes it easy for them to grade. But technically, any kind of set, any order is fine. And this is not a function. It's not a function because the x values repeat. Meaning that at 3 o'clock, I told men they could buy the stock at $1, and I told women they can buy the stock at $2. That's illegal. I can't do that. Okay. So functions always look like this. Not a function looks like this. Meaning that at a particular time, I gave someone 2 different prices. That's illegal. So any kind of graph where you're collecting data, how many people have COVID, how many COVID deaths there are, the census, anytime at any moment there's only one number for that moment, that's going to be a function. Okay, so go ahead and do domain and range and tell me whether this is a function or not. So domain is the x values. And I think in the XYZ, they provide the curly braces. Okay. Range is and if you go, is this a function? The answer is yes. See, we can repeat the y's and we can repeat the numbers in a point. That's fine. What we can't do is repeat the x values. We can't
Professor?
give. Yep, go ahead.
Wouldn't 0 also be in the range?
Oh, you're right. Sorry, I missed it. Okay. The only thing we can't do is give someone a different value for the at the same moment. Okay, so let's take a picture of this. Okay. Now this one's going to be on your test. Make sure you mark it. Okay. Okay. Now, let's break out that domain and range. The domain and range worksheet I gave you guys. All right. So let me show you what it looks like. I texted it out yesterday. If you don't have it, I'll text it out right now to you. So let me send it in the remind. Okay, so let me text this. In case you don't have it, let me text it in the remind right now to you. Oops, that's not right. This here. Okay, let me send it. Out of curiosity, for the people who've done the exam, did you have enough time or were you rushed? Just you can text it in the chat if you don't speak up. Were people okay with time or did it feel rushed? Okay. In general, what I'm trying to do is give you 3 minutes per question, and then after I figure out 3 minutes per question, give you an extra 10, 15 minutes just to sort of deal with the stress. So if you felt like, whoa, that was just not enough time, either text me, email, or talk to me, and I can reconsider it. Okay. Okay. Now, and then what I'm thinking about doing for the final is that normally what I give students, Okay. Normally what I do, thanks, Joseph. Normally what I do for the final is I give you like 4 or 5 copies of my old final, and I say, this is what's going to be on the test. What I'll likely do is the quizzes and the practice quizzes will be your finals review. And then what I'll do is I'll probably take your final exam questions from either the practice or the actual quiz itself, so that it'll ask you the same question but just with different numbers. So that's probably what I'm going to do for your final. So just know that the practice quizzes and the quizzes, they're going to get repeated. On the final, I don't like to give you anything that you've never seen before. I like it to be like, if you mess it up once, you know it now, and then you can do it. So let's just move on with our lives. Okay, so let's get going. Let me pop this up. And then let me share screen. Okay, and we have solutions. You have solutions to all of these on the haiku. And then let me okay. Now, what we're going to try to do is we're going to work on domain and range. Okay, so forget this part right now. We're going to get there in a second. Okay. Now, whenever you're doing domain and range, the first thing you want to do is you want to figure out the direction of the arrows. So let's work on this page 1, top left. Okay, so let me annotate it. Okay, so the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what direction is the arrows going? Okay. So if we look at this arrow right here, that arrow is going up and it's going to the right. Now, when we look at domain and range, what domain specifies is how much to the left do we go, and then how much to the right do we go. In terms of the range specifies how far down do we go and how far up do we go. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to put infinity in the directions of the arrow. Oops, sorry. Let me change this to red. So since this is going up and to the right, we have an infinity here. Let's just call that infinity. And next to infinity, we always put a parentheses. Okay. So we have a infinity in the direction of right, and we have an infinity in the direction of up. Okay. So, right, domain is left, right. And since this is going right, we put infinity there. And then range is down to up. And since it's going up, we put infinity where up is. So what we have to figure out next is how far left do we go? Okay. And what you want to do is count the boxes, right? You go, I am to the left, 1, 2, 3 boxes to the left. And then you want to figure out how far down do I go? So then over here you go, I am going, oh, I'm sorry. In terms of domain, that should be a negative.
Are you counting through from the origin?
From the origin, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I shouldn't say the origin, from the x-axis. So the leftmost point is over here. So you're counting 1 box, 2 box, 3 boxes. Okay. And then in terms of range, we're saying how far down does it go? Because we know it goes up to infinity. So then we are saying, okay, we're going down 4 boxes. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now at this point, everyone is silent, which means that people are so lost that they don't even have a question yet. Right? And we're going to keep doing this until you're comfortable.
Professor?
Uh-huh.
Since it's, I mean, I know they're not ordered pairs, but why use a bracket?
Okay, so you're asking the right question. The idea here is that if I was going to smush my graph onto the x-axis, just get a bulldozer and push it this way and get a bulldozer and push it this way, right? And you're asking the right question. Or I said, where does this graph exist? This exact graph exists. Let me see, where is this? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me erase that. Okay. This exact graph exists. Oops. Gosh darn it. No, is it going to let me draw it? Let's see. From here to here. Meaning that if you were to tell me, hey, how much did my stock cost at -3? Oh, your stock cost $2. How much did my stock cost at -1? Oh, it cost -$4. So what the domain tells me is that this graph exists above or below the x-axis from here all the way to infinity because this arrow goes on for infinity. In terms of the range, it's telling me the same thing, that my graph exists from here. Oops, sorry. From here. Geez. All right, from here Oh, is that not going to help me? It's not going to work with me today. All the way up to infinity. The reason why is this graph, because it has an arrow, technically this graph is going on forever. And that's why we say infinity. This graph doesn't just stop here, it goes on forever. So that's why this domain, let me erase that one, goes from that's really what we're saying our domain is. Our domain is from -3 to infinity because this graph extends forever. And the range is from -4 to infinity because this graph extends forever. Did anyone else have questions? I can't see the chat, so if you have a question, you have to speak up.
I'm sorry, Professor. Can you repeat that one more time?
Sure. What the domain is basically saying this graph. Sorry, here's my domain. This black graph, it exists above the x-axis from this point and then forever. That's where the graph lives. It doesn't exist over here. Over here, the graph is undefined. It starts to live at that point, exactly at -3, and then it goes on forever. Okay. In terms of the range, we're starting down here, and because this graph goes on forever, the range goes all the way up forever. Okay. So let's do this one, right? And no one should be happy at this point, right? So if you're unhappy, you're normal. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what direction are these arrows moving? Right? Use words: left, right, up, down. Okay. So these arrows are moving up, left, and right. Okay. So if you think of range as down, up, and domain as left, right, put infinity under up, left, and right. Okay, so in terms of domain, so that's left, and that's right. And in terms of range, oops, I'm sorry, let me erase that. Let me put parentheses underneath there. Anytime we have an infinity, we always put a parentheses. Okay. So that's left, that's right. Then in terms of range, we do not know what the left is. Right? We do not know what the left is. But we do know that the right is, the up is going up. We don't know what the down is. So the question is, how far down do I go?
Professor.
Mm-hmm.
So even if the graph is going infinitely to the left and to the right, or
Mm-hmm.
up and down, we still use a bracket for numbers, no matter what?
We always use brackets for numbers, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So if we go, how far down do I go? you would count the boxes over here and you go, I went down -1 boxes. Oops. So the idea here is that if I'm trying to describe my graph goes beyond this box in terms of the X and Y, and it goes from -1 all the way up to infinity. Because those arrows go up forever. Okay, so let's try doing another one. I'll take a picture of this and I'll mail it out to you guys. Okay, so let's clear this. And let's see if we can go down at all. Clear that. All right, so let's go to page 6. Let's do this one on the right. All right, so first ask yourself, what direction is that arrow going? Okay, so that arrow is going down and to the right. Okay, so put infinity where down is, right? Down is the range, and then put infinity where the right is. Okay, so domain is left to right, right? So we know that the right is going to be infinity. So the question is, all right, how far left did I go? And what you want to do is you want to count boxes. You want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, -4 to the left. Now go ahead and do range. Range is down and then up. Okay, so we know that that it goes down to -infinity, and then we go to the right. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right, down, and then we know that the highest point is this right here, and that'll be 1. Okay, so the idea here is that this line because the arrow goes on forever. So the domain is from here to forever. And then the range is from here and then forever. So try doing 16. Okay. So ask yourself, what direction is that graph going? That graph is going down and to the left. So go ahead and do the domain and range. Okay. So remember, domain is left, right. Okay. So domain is left, right. We know left is infinity. So how far right is, we're going to count boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then in terms of range, we know that we're going down. And then we know that we're going, if we count boxes from the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, we're going 3 up. Okay, let's do one more. Okay, let's do a problem that has no arrows. Let me get rid of that. So let's go down to page, oh, there we go. Let's go down to page 4. Oh, I'm sorry, page 3, and we're going to do the triangle. Okay, so there's no arrows. You're just telling me how far left does the triangle go, how far right, how far down, and then how far up. Okay. So in terms of how far to the left, we go -3, right? 1, 2, 3 boxes. And then how far right? 1, 2, 3, 3 boxes. Okay, now range is how far down? And then how far up? 4 boxes. Okay, now, probably, I'm guessing by the virtual nature of this, there are a lot of lost people and just a lot of shy lost people. Why don't we take a 10-minute break? Let's come back at 9:20, so 13 minutes. And then if you have a question, you ask a question. We'll do one more question like this, and then we'll keep moving on. But if you have questions, I'll keep doing this. So let me just give people a second to sort of formulate their question. And I'm more than happy to redo a previous example. Okay? All right, so let's take a break. Thanks, everyone. Okay, let's get back to this. Let's do this one on the left over here. And if you have a question, now's the time to ask it. Okay, figure out what direction that arrow is going. So the direction of this arrow is down and then right. Okay. Now fill out domain and range. Okay, so domain should be right to left. Oh, I'm sorry. Left to right. I'm sorry. And then range should be down and then up. Okay.
Professor,
Uh-huh.
wouldn't the domain be bracket -4 positive infinity?
Oh, yeah, it should be positive. You're right. Let me fix that. All right, so let's go. This should be negative infinity, comma. Domain is, sorry. Therefore, comma, infinity. Thank you. All right. Okay, so if you had any struggle with this, look at the videos for domain and range that I emailed you a few days ago. It's also on the haiku above the domain and range worksheets. Because they'll do the exact same thing I did right now. Okay, so let's go back. Let me expand this. Okay. So let's work on function. So the way you test function for a graph is the vertical line test. Okay. So if you can draw a line and hit the graph more than once, then not a function. So if I have something that looks like this, because I draw a vertical line and hit it twice somewhere, it's not a function. Okay, let me give everyone a chance to catch up in copying. And then there were some questions which we'll go over later in this class, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time now doing. So I just sort of removed them from your homework. So if I have something that looks like this, where it never crosses back on itself, that's a function. Okay, so I'm going to draw some graph shapes. You tell me whether it's a function or not a function. Okay, so each one of these is a separate one. Okay, this one's a function. This one's a function. Oh, this is not a function. This is a function. So the graphs can be disconnected. Just like the stock market. We're not trading stock in the middle of the night. So you could have IBM stock over here and then IBM stock the next day. So no trading in the middle. So it's possible to have graphs that aren't connected. They're still functions, as long as they don't overlap vertically. And this one's not a function. Okay. And I will push on every different type of question that says domain and range. I'll make sure I ask you. So it's going to be much heavier on my exam than most other math teachers, only because that's real math. Like, you actually have to get this right.
So we can expect more domain and range problems than other problems on the test.
Yeah, pretty much. If it says domain and there's only one domain and range question that I won't repeat, and I'll show you what that is right now because I don't like it. But for the rest of them, I'm going to ask you every kind. Okay. Now, so this is done. Actually, not done. Let's go back to, there's a couple boutique questions that are on your homework that I want to look at. I just want to sort of show you how to do it so you don't waste a lot of time. I don't think they're the most important thing in the world. So let's see. Let's go to 3.4. Oh, that's not it. I gotta go to your homework. Okay. See, what a lot of times, the vast majority of math teachers have never had a job doing math. So what most people sort of focus on is what's in the next class, which is not a bad thing, right? My job as a teacher is to make sure that you pass your next class. So that's not the worst thing in the world. But the problem is that things that are actually used on the job are not emphasized. In fact, they're de-emphasized because a lot of times you go, there are things that are used constantly at work. And because there's no next section, people go, well, that's a thing, but it's not in your next class. I'm running out of time. Let's just skip it. Whereas the things that are really important for work, I make sure they're overemphasized in your test. Okay, and there aren't a lot of things like that, but domain and range is one of them. That is the only way you can protect yourself at work, where you go, it's really not my fault, is domain and range. Okay, so this is question 1 on your exam, and what they do is they give you points, not they give you points, not a graph. Well, actually, this is a graph, but not a connected graph. Okay, so if we were to look at each point, so this point here is -4, 2. This point here is -3, -2, and so on and so forth. If I ask you what the domain is, what you do is you tell me the x value of every point. Okay, so go ahead and tell me the x value of every point. Go ahead and write it down. And then I'll take a picture of this and send it to you, so you don't have to worry about copying the graph. Okay. So you have -4, -3, and then over here, that x, oh, sorry. This x value here is 2, and then we have 6. Okay, now go ahead and do the range. The range is all of the y values. Okay, and then again, I'll email this to you, so you don't have to worry about copying these points. Yeah. And this is fair game on your exam.
Professor,
Mm-hmm.
just to be clear, it doesn't have to be in greatest to least, even in XYZ homework.
I don't know. If they tell you, usually they give you a hint where they tell you make it biggest to smallest.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't say anything, any order should work.
Okay.
Professor?
Uh-huh.
In XYZ homework, it does want it in least to greatest. It doesn't.
Oh, does
it
it?
doesn't ask you, but it still expects you to have it.
Okay, so just know that that's just a programming thing where your programmer was lazy.
Okay.
Okay, it's not it's in real life. Any set can be any order, but then again, you're talking about a guy where someone yells at him, "We need this question," which is what happened. I'll yell at them, "I need this question by Friday. I'm going to cover the section," and they go and they build it, and just like you guys saw that last question that you guys found an error, they fixed it. But it was something that they had just created because I go, you're missing this in the question set, and they made it last minute right for that section. So mistakes happen. So then this one will be, so the y values are, so if we go smallest to biggest, it'll be -4, so we'll go bottom up. -2, -1, 2, and then 4, like that. Okay. The other problem too is that, remember, the programmers aren't teachers, and the programmers are people like me, where I haven't done this since I was 17, and then they're probably 50, and they're just it's on hazy memory also. Okay. Now ask yourself, is this a function or not a function? Okay, so this is not a function. You can look at it two ways. One is, oops, that's no good. One is that I can draw a vertical line, right? I have 2 points that are on 6. So this one is not a function. Okay. And then I should be able to email you this one right after class. I don't think I have a meeting after this. Make sure. Okay, so here we go. Okay. Now there's one, the next question I don't care too much about. It's a common staple in these type in this section, but I don't care about it because we're going to talk about it in detail in a little bit, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So I'm just going to give you the magic sauce for it. Okay, that's not it. Where is it? Oh, did I erase it? Maybe I erased it already. I did. I erased it. Never mind. You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, there's some problems crossed out on the homework.
Yeah, I crossed them out. We're going to cover them later in like gory detail. I hate magic problems where I go, do this, and you go, how come? And I'll go, magic. And I'll explain it to you in a couple weeks. Like, I'd rather just like in a couple weeks, I explain it to you, and then we move on with our lives.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not that we're skipping it, is that there's a more appropriate place to spend time. So rather than what they're trying to do is just sort of like, so like there's something interesting that's happening and we're going to sort of like hint at it. I hate that stuff. Like just when we get there, let me know.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So this section is now done. And then let's look at 3.5. Okay, so that's done. That's done. I think we have only one thing. Let me make sure that we only have one thing. Okay. So, all right, there's 2 things that we have to do. Actually, 3 things. Okay. So let's look at a couple of these things. Let's look at section 3.5. And then for those of you who are here from high school, just know college is better than high school. It just is. We don't spend a lot of time where you're forced to do time-consuming stuff. We just tell you the stuff. You just get it done, move on with your life. The rest of the day is yours.
Professor?
Mm-hmm.
For test number 2,
Mhm.
what sections will we be covering?
It's just whatever we cover this week.
Okay.
Okay. Which means, right, this is the magic of education. Most people don't know this. More questions you ask, the less that is covered, the less that's on the test. Now, when you're an undergrad, everyone's nervous about that. But when you're a graduate student, you are a professional student. And you learn how to filibuster a little bit. Okay. Let's go to let's try this problem. Okay. So go ahead and graph it. Okay. This is section 3.5. And I'm just going to go through a typical problem. So you don't have to waste a lot of time guessing it. All right. So go ahead and graph that. Okay, think of that as y equals negative 3x minus 2. And the nice thing about function notation is you can always use y equal mx plus b. You can always use slope intercept. So go ahead and draw that. Okay, so get your y-intercept is -2. Oh, I totally missed it. There we go. Roughly there. Okay. And then use the -3, right? Go down 3, right 1. Okay. Go down 3. And then go to the right 1. And then you draw your line. Now make sure that you know that when you have a line, you have, oops, that's not even close. You have arrows.
Professor, how do you start at -1?
Oh, I just completely missed it.
Being negative.
I've got jiggle hands. Let me try that again. All right.
Thank you.
I got jiggle hands. All right. There we go. You know when you watch your parents and they're doing the internet and you just kind of watch them, they're really slow and it's just kind of painful. That's what this is. The only sort of nice thing about this is that I get paid $1 every minute and a half. Oh, $1.50 per minute. So that's the good part about this. Well, for me, not you. Okay, now let's draw that line. All right, is that better? -2 down 3 over 1. Okay, so let's go here with my jiggle hands. All right, something like that. No, didn't like red? Ah, too bad. It's pink. Okay, so now that we've had the graph, we can look at the domain and range. And then people will look at this and go, left, right. I've got arrows on both sides. Is it just -infinity to infinity? You go, yep. You go up, down. Is it just -infinity to infinity? The answer is yep. And that's it. And you're like, is that true with all diagonal lines? And the answer is yep. So don't stress it. So I usually don't ask this line because what's the point? But I didn't want you to spend a lot of time just wondering like, feels like every question, the answer is exactly the same. And the answer is, yep. So for lines, if you have a diagonal line, this is what you'll get every time. Okay, now, but there's, okay, now let's get to the important stuff. There's two things that are pretty important. Oh, sorry, let me take a better picture. All right. This is the part that's important from this section. Okay, so let's go back to the domain and range, worksheet. Okay, let me pop that up. Give me 1 second, I gotta find it. So let's go back to the domain and range worksheet. And then if you're confused with what I'm gonna just do, it's on the function video in that domain and range little worksheet box. All right, so where are we? Did it come up? There we go. Okay, and now let me share screen. Okay, and I thank everyone for your patience. I have something very similar to dyslexia. It's not actually dyslexia, but it's like dyslexia. So you'll see me like miscopy things or say something and then write the wrong thing. And that's basically what it is. So more than most teachers, I will miscopy things. So I appreciate when you guys are thoughtful when you just say, hey, that's wrong. Because, yeah, that's going to happen. Okay. These two on the bottom, find all values of x where f of x is equal to 3 and f of 1 is equal to whatever. Those two are really important. This notation is going to be used all over the place in every literature, whether you are a psychology, sociology. If you're not reading from a textbook and you're reading from something that was just discovered within this year or last year, it's going to have this notation in it. So it's really important that you understand what that means. Now, over here, so on your XYZ homework, there's only one question because there's only one question that exists on the software. So I would recommend using this just to know how to do this. Okay. Now the key here is f of x is equal to y. Okay. And this is another way of writing the point x comma y. Okay. Now, when we do this one right here, f of 1, okay, if we were to sort of overlap it with f of x is equal to y, what we would see is that what this question really is asking is, when x is equal to 1, what is y? So do you see how in this overlap, the inside is x. So when x is equal to 1, we want to know what y is. Okay. Okay. So go ahead, copy that. So on this graph, if we were to look for f of x is equal to y, that's right, x equal to 1, right? So if we were to draw the line x equal to 1, okay, so that's the line x equal to 1. We can see that we hit the graph at this point over here. So I'm saying when x is equal to 1, where do we hit our graph? Or at x is equal to 1, what is the price of our stock, of our stocks? Our stock is 3 boxes. So this point right here is basically one comma 3. So what we're saying is that at x equal to 1, I hit my graph at y equal to 3. Okay, now, a lot of you should be unhappy. So if you have a question, go ahead and ask me your question. No? Okay. Now, this one over here, use a different color. Okay. What that is asking for is when y is equal to 3, what is x? So remember that f of x is equal to y. So over here, when y is equal to 3, what is x? Let me write that in blue if I can. Okay. So when I draw the line y equal to 3, I'm going through the y-axis. I'm then asking myself, at what x value does this horizontal line hit this graph? Well, I hit it at this point, and at that point. So I'm hitting it at x equal minus 3, 1, and 3. So if we were to use our stock analogy, I would say over here, when is my IBM stock at $3? It's like, well, you could have bought your stock at -3 for $3. You could have bought your stock at 1 for $3, and you could have bought your stock for $3 at 3. At these three time periods, that's when the stock was selling at $3 per share. Okay, there should be panic right now. Anyone want to ask a question?
Professor,
Uh-huh.
if the domain is from left to right, how come drawing a horizontal line gives us 3 points?
Oh, what the domain means is that if you give me any value, right? So the domain here is -infinity to infinity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what domain means, meaning that you can give me any value, 2, 9, -100, and I can tell you from this graph how much your stock costs.
Okay.
What this is asking for isn't domain. What it's asking for is, when did this hit $3? See, over here, my stock costs less than $3. Over here and over here, my stock costs more than $3.
Okay.
I want to know, when was the stock selling at $3? You could buy it at $3 here, here, and here. At those 3 moments, the stock costs $3.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess I got confused because like when you had them all like from left to right on the same plane, I guess I forgot that if you have a different, because they all have a different x value, so it's still a function.
Yeah. All right. So there should be unhappiness. Let's try doing this one. We'll do a bunch of these. Okay. So this one right here is asking, when x is equal to -1, what is y? So draw the line x equal -1. Draw a line through -1 through the x-axis.
y equal -2.
Almost, let's see. So we're going to draw it through here, right?
And 4. Wait. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's where -1 is, right? Oops, I'm sorry. Let me draw it red, though. Okay, so going through the x-axis at -1 should be right there.
-4.
-4, you got it. That's true, right? So the point that we're going through is this one right here. So this one should be -4. Okay, now let's do the blue one. So this one right here, when y is equal to -1, what is x? That's what this is asking. Okay, so we're gonna, right now, we're gonna draw a line that goes through here. I'm gonna try and make it in blue. See if it'll turn to blue. No? Okay, let's erase it and try it again. Okay, so the point I care about is right here. Okay, and that will be -2 like that. Let me give people a second to digest. And anyone have a question on this? We're going to do another 2.
Won't include a
Professor?
3 on the answer, Professor.
Say that again?
Won't include a number 3 on the answer, -2 and 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. We do have another one there. I totally missed that one. Thank you. We should have this one too. Yeah. So we should also have 3. Thanks for catching that for me.
Professor,
Yes.
so we would write this left to right.
I'm assuming in XYZ, yeah, but in real life, it doesn't matter. In real life, any order should be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, if you just sort of ask the basic question, hey, when could I buy IBM stock for $100 today? You go 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And then someone went, no, 4 o'clock and 2 o'clock. You're like, what a jerk, right? Both ways would be appropriate in terms of the answer. Okay. All right, so let me clear this. Let's try another one. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Let's go down a little bit. Let's go to page, don't worry about the one-to-one and is it a function? Okay, so go ahead and let's do page 3. Let's do this left one and this right one. Okay, so for this, it is when x is equal to -1. What is y? So you do that there. So you're reading y at the intersection. So this is my only semi-viral video. Viral means 100 people, like a few hundred people have watched it. I told my friend, I got a viral video. I got a few hundred people watching it. My friend's son goes, "Oh, that's cool." And I go, "How many people are listening to your Spotify um, playlist?" And he said, "Oh, I get about 200,000 a month." And then his sister, she takes pictures of models where she's just a college student, and she every day she takes a picture of a new model. So there are a million models in LA that want to become famous and need headshots, and she wants to be a photographer. So every day she just goes on the net and she says, "I'll take a picture. You get the headshots. I get you. We both release the photos for each other to use." And every day she puts up a new model of a new local wannabe model. I think she has 60,000. I've got, I don't know, 400, 300 people watching this video. So that's about as good as you get. Can't compete with a girl taking pictures of models. Okay. Now, when we're down over here, this one right here, what we're asking ourselves is when y is equal to 1, what is x? Okay. So we're going to draw y equal to 1. We're going to go through here. Okay, and you should have, I have -4 with my old man eyes, and I have 2. So do the same with 6 over here. Okay. Over here, we have x is equal to -2. Oops. Okay, so it hits it at -3. And we have the it's over here. Oh, wrong color again. we have y equal to 0. Okay, and that's going to be -3, -1, and then I have 3. Okay, let's take a picture of this. Okay, that's good. Okay, so let's do the last little bit of this section. Let me give everyone a second to like copy, and then we'll move on. Okay. Now, let's go to the last thing in this section. Let me erase. Oh, let me stop sharing screen. I'm good. Yeah, I am good. All right. So let's clear the decks. This is still section 3.5. Okay. So let's look at this. Graph square root of f of x is equal okay. Now this is something you'll do in calculus. So those of you taking business calculus or calculus, they don't spend much time on it. So it's not something that we build a lot upon in this class, but just be aware that someone's just going to throw this at you, and you're just going to have to be comfortable picking this up in a semester or two. Okay. Now, in the past, we were just working on line. So we could just do 2 points, and then we would get a line. Now, the problem here is that most square roots are a fraction. Well, have a fraction, or actually, they're not a fraction. Most square roots are decimals, like square root of 2 is equal to 1.21, It goes on forever. Okay. And that's sort of the problem with square roots is I like dealing with whole numbers, and especially in XYZ, I don't think they're going to let you graph an irrational number like that. So the thing that you have to be careful about is that you can only work with perfect squares. So for example, I need this to turn into 0, square root of 0, because square root of 0 is 0. I need whatever I plug in here to turn into square root of 1, square root of 4, and then square root of 9. We can't go to negative numbers because square roots of negative numbers don't exist. Okay. Now, what I want to do is ask myself, what number can I put in here so I get something minus 1, and it ultimately becomes 0? Well, the answer is 1. Right? 1 minus 1 then turns into this. Okay, so then again, you ask yourself the question, what can I subtract -1 from and then get 1? The answer would be 2. Okay, ask yourself that question again. What number can I put in here and end up with getting 4? And the answer would be 5. Right? 5 minus 1 is 4. And what can I put in here and end up getting 9, and that would be 10. So the reason why we pick these numbers is because these are the only square roots that turn into a whole number. So since this is my formula, ultimately I need to add I need to put a number in here which turns into something that's square rootable. Okay. So ultimately, the points that I am graphing are these. Right? That's my x. That's my y. That's my x. That's my y. That's my x. That's my y. Okay. I should have 10 people. Anyone have questions? Okay. And if you look at the file with in which I have all my like help videos, there should be a help video on this one that I made. Okay. But we're going to do another one. People are quiet, so I have a feeling that there are a lot of lost people who are just very shy. Okay, so let's look at this. Try graphing these points. Oh, shoot. The long way is supposed to be this way. Try graphing those points. Get 1 0 2 1 5 1 2 3 4 5 2 then 10 and 3. Okay. Now this is the key point for this. This graph goes on forever in terms of getting bigger, but it stops here. The reason why is we can never get -1. This does not exist. So -1 doesn't exist, but we can always pick larger perfect squares if we had more room. So usually I tell students, go up to about 9. Once you get to 9, it probably won't fit on the graph. So we can always get bigger in terms of square roots, but the smallest square root is 0. So that's why that's a dot here, and then this goes on forever. And then the point of this question is then it asks you, what's the domain? And then what's the range?
Professor,
Go ahead.
is there a certain name for a graph that uses a square root? Like I know when you use an exponent, it's exponential. Is there a name for this?
I don't think so for square roots. I don't think there is one.
Okay.
If you have a square, it's like a quadratic, and if you have a cube, x cube, it's called a cubic. But square roots, I don't think there's anything. Oh, it's called a radical.
A radical graph?
A radical, yeah.
Okay.
So a radical is something like that. But for square roots specifically, so radicals will be something more general like that. But if you're just talking only specifically a square root, then I don't think so. Okay, so we ask ourselves, what direction is this graph going? It's going to the right and it's going up. So domain is left, right. The range is down and up. So put a infinity on right and up. Up. And then how far left it goes is 1. And how far down it goes is 0. So they just want you to practice drawing a graph and then doing the domain and range. Okay, let's do another one of this. I know people are not very happy. So let's do one together where I give you guys a little bit of time to try it out. Yeah, we have 32 people. So we started out with 55. And usually what happens is after that first quiz, that first weekend, it just kind of sucks and we just lose a bunch of people, which is this is pretty natural. Okay, so let's try this again. So let's graph. So you're going to want to pick the x where you get square root of 0, square root of 1, square root of 4, and square root of 9. So what you're plugging in is something plus 2 is equal to that. Something plus 2 is equal to this. Something plus 2 is equal to that. And something plus 2 is equal to this, right? So figure out what number goes in here. And that goes here and here, the same number.
Professor?
Mhm.
I have a question about how to set up like a graph on an X and Y axis.
What do you mean the X and Y axis? What do you mean
Like,
by that?
I wanted to ask, if I have my Y axis going by 2s, so 2, 4, 6, 8, does my X have to be the same, or can I have my X 1, 2, 3, 4?
In real life, they can be different.
Okay.
In fact, in real life, most of the time they're different. So if you were to look at sort of any like you're asking something actually smart. Let's talk about this, right? If you actually were like had a job and you had to make a graph. So let's say you're working on coronavirus.
Right.
Let me put up a graph. Just any random graph. Let me pop it up. And then let me share a screen with you. Most of the time when you have any graphs, the units for the X and Y don't even match. Right? So if we looked at confirmed cases of coronavirus, this is a date and this is millions of people, right? Same thing with something like this over here. Most of these graphs, this is the date, this is thousands of deaths. So most of the time, the units on the XY axis don't match. They only match because it's school.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So you don't have to care about them matching at all. Okay. Now, the number I can add to 2 to get 0 would be -2. So 2 minus 1 is equal to 1. Okay, so do these and do this one. Okay. And then 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. Seven plus 2 is equal to 9. So go ahead and write what each point is supposed to be and then graph it. And then find the domain and range.
Professor, sorry, I got lost a little bit. How did you come up with the number X again?
Okay, you're asking the right question. Okay. Now, let me erase all of these, okay? I've got a problem. XYZ doesn't let me graph using decimals. They're forcing me to use square roots. Now, if I know at the end of the day when I plug in a number, I want to get one of these square roots because these are the only square roots that turn into a whole number. Okay, are we okay with that? Why these are our targets?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm constricted that I have to use this formula to figure out what y is. So what I need to do is that each of these, I have to, whatever x is, I have to add 2 and get that value. Okay. So when I'm here, right, this comes from this right here. So the game is I got to pick a number that goes in here. Well, when I add them together, I get 9. So 7 plus 2 is 9. Now, what number can I put in here and get 4? So go ahead, Tim. What plus 2 is equal to 4?
2.
Yeah, and that's how we got that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Now the hard part is when we have minus, right? So 2 minus 1 is equal to 1, and that's why we put the minus 1 there and the minus 2 there. Okay. And if other people have questions, ask. Okay. So now I look at these as XY pairs. -2 and 0, -1 and 1, 2 and 2, and then 3 and 7, and that's what I'm going to plot on my XY axis.
Professor, the last one should be 7 and 3.
Oh, 7 and 3, thank you. Is that my dyslexia thing again? Thank you. Now, if you're getting overwhelmed by everything we're doing because we're going really fast, just know that when I teach this in the fall, I start at a much easier place. We don't get to this till about the 3rd week. And I cover only 2 sections a day, sometimes 1 for the heavy ones. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, just know it's way slower. So I have -2, 0. I have -1, 1. I have 2, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. 7, 3. And then it looks something like that. Make sure there's an arrow. Now write down what the domain and range is. Okay. So we're going up and right. And from the left, I'm going -2. And from the down, I'm going 0. Okay. I'm going to leave this up there. Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 10:40, and then we'll start the next section. Okay, so let's get going. We're going to start section 4.1. I'm not sure if we're going to finish it. If I rush, we can finish it. And I'd prefer not to rush because a lot of you are still working on ramping up for the quiz today. So most likely 4.1 will be due on Thursday, but we'll see. If I get no questions, then it'll be due on Wednesday. Okay. So let's explain what 4.1 is. Okay. So section 4.1 is systems of linear equations. Okay. Now, for the most part, until you get to about the third year of calculus, I hate to tell you, but most problems that we're solving are toy problems, meaning that they really aren't something you would do at a job. At your job, someone's going to ask you, should I invest in Apple stock? Yes or no? And then you would say, well, I have a lot of questions. There's a lot of variables I need to know. Are people buying Apple? What is the unemployment? Does it look like the economy is going forward? What's the current stock market? What do their competitors look like? Most of the time when you're asked a question at work, there are multiple things to consider. Now, everything that we've been solving up to now has been like 2x plus 3 is equal to 7. There's only one variable here, right? Most of the time when you're trying to answer a real question in life, like how do we stop the transmission of COVID? Well, there's a lot of variables. Are we going to be open in next September? Well, there's a lot of variables. So this chapter 4 is about talking about what happens if we have more than one variable that we have to balance in order to find a solution to our problem, which is what most problems are. Now, all the way up to Calc 2, for the most part, you're working on one variable all the way through. Once you get to Calc 3, we're then working on 3 variables. And then once you get to linear algebra, we're doing 1,000 variables, 1,000,000 variables. Okay? So you have to go through quite a bit of math before we actually start talking about multiple variables. But chapter 4 is your first sort of step into it. Okay. So let's think about what happens when I have multiple variables. Let's say I have something that looks like this. Okay. So I want to have all the numbers that I add together and turn into 5. And we sort of played this game before. That if we then graph all the points that satisfy that problem, okay, so 2 and 3, 2 and, oops, I'm sorry. 2 and 3, 1 and 4, -1 and 6. Oh, sorry. What happens is we get a line, meaning that every one of these points satisfies this equation. Okay, well, that's no fun. If I'm asking you some question about whether I should buy IBM stock or not, I want to have a yes or no answer. I want to know how many to buy. I want to know when to buy it. I don't want an answer where you're like, well, it depends. If you do this, do this. If you do this, do this. If you do this, do this. As your customer, I just want to tell you, shut up. Just tell me when and tell me how much, and then I'll just do that. So we need another constraint. If I have two variables and only one equation, I have an infinite number of answers. So I need something else. So let's look at this. Let me try y is equal to 2x minus 1. So this is the black line. This is the blue line. And I said, well, I have two constraints. Not only do you have to satisfy this equation, you also have to satisfy this equation. Okay, so I'll graph this. This time I'm going to graph it using slope-intercept. I'm going to put a dot in -1, and I'm going to go up 2 over 1, and I'll draw this line. Okay. And even though, because I got jiggle hands, it's not perfect, they intersect at 2, 3. We call that the solution.
Professor,
Mm-hmm.
how did you get the 2 and 3 from the?
When you draw the two lines, so normally you would use grid paper,
Okay.
and you would draw the two lines, and you would just kind of see where they intersect. Because this isn't exactly right, it doesn't look right, but that's where it's supposed to be.
So would you recommend for like these problems that we're gonna do right now, like to get graphing papers so it's a better understanding?
Not really. If you go on the XYZ, they'll draw a line and they'll draw it perfectly for you.
Okay.
And then you'll draw another line, draw perfectly, and you'll just see what corner does it go through.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. It's just because this is me with no graph paper on this thing. Okay. Now, so the intersection is the solution. So this is the basic problem, okay? The first problem that they're going to give you is they're going to ask, okay? So pretend we didn't graph this. Pretend we didn't graph it. They're going to ask you, is 0, 5 a solution of these two equations? Okay, now, pretend we didn't graph it. Okay, so without graphing this, can you tell me whether this is in the intersection of the 2 points? So the first thing you would do is you would plug it in. So you would get x plus y is equal to 5, x is equal to 0, y is equal to 5. And you would tell me, is this true? That's a yes.
Why would we plug in 0, 5?
Oh, because the original question is asking you. So
Okay.
pretend I don't know the answer is 2 comma 3. Right? So initially, I just wanted to show you what the actual answer is. But pretend we don't know what the actual answer is. And they're going to ask you, is this the solution? And what you do is you plug it into both of them. And if one of them gives you a false statement, the answer is no. Okay, so plug it into the second one and see whether you get the right answer, whether it's a yes or no. So we get y is equal to 0 times x minus 1. Oops, I'm sorry. 5 is equal to. Let me do that again. That's totally wrong. 5 is equal to times 0 minus 1. 5 is equal to minus 1. So then this is true. Jeez. This is false. Okay. Now this is the key after all these mistakes I've making. If either is false, then not a solution. So the answer to this is no. 0, 5 is not a solution. 0, 5 is basically here. So basically what's happening is that when I plug it into the black line, it tells me, oh, yeah, it's on the black line. Then you're going to check whether it's on the blue line, and it's going to say, no, we're not on the blue line. They go, oh, that's not a solution. You have to be on both lines in order to be a solution. Okay. Now, the other way I can ask you this problem is I can say, is 2, 3 a solution of this thing right here? So go ahead and plug it into both things and see if you get a true and a true.
Professor?
Mhm.
So is this problem different than the problems we did on the last quiz where you told us we wouldn't have to go back and plug it in to check because it was always right?
Similar. For this one, all you're doing is there's basically when you plug it in and it's true, it's just telling you it's on the line.
Right.
So when someone's asking you, hey, I've got 2 lines, is it a solution? What they're asking is, hey, is this point on both lines?
Okay.
That's all it's asking.
Got it.
So you're not double checking. You're just, the true means, yeah, it's on this line. No, it's not on that line.
Okay.
So as soon as you get a false, you know it's not a solution because it has to be on every line.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so you get x plus y is equal to 5. X is equal to 0. I'm sorry, 2. Y is equal to 3. So we get 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. 5 is equal to 5, and that's true. So go ahead and do it for the other one. And if you get true and true, then it's a solution. So this is true. Okay. Now both are true. Solution. Now, don't sleep on this problem. Just because it's not hard doesn't mean I won't ask it. Because see, these numbers are close, right? So that's true. But let's say this was 5 and this was 4.8, almost true. You'd say like, that's almost the answer. Let's jiggle it. Let's move it a little bit, and check if it's a solution. And if it gets closer, you go, let's move it more in that direction because that seemed to help. If it gets worse, you go, well, let's move it in the opposite direction because moving it seemed to make it worse. So let's move it in the opposite direction. So don't sleep on this question because there's a lot of techniques where you may not have the answer, but you know how far you are by, are these numbers at least close? Well, let's jiggle it and see whether it made it closer or further. And let's play with it to sort of see if we can like work our way to the answer. So a lot of times when you have 1,000 lines or a million equations and a million variables, we actually don't know how to solve that. The computation power to solve it perfectly is an unknown. We run out of time on our computer. So there is a lot of jiggling methods where you're like, how close are we? Move it. Worse or better? If it's better, let's keep moving in that direction. If it's worse, let's change directions. What got worse? Okay, the part that got better, let's keep that part, but the part that got worse, let's go in the opposite direction of that. So this is an open area of investigation. See, most problems, like if we were to talk about, are you likely to get COVID within the next 3 years? So eventually, as all the people in the United States move around, are you someone who's going to eventually get it? So a question like that, you're looking at 325 million people. And have you been in contact with any of these other 325 million people? That's a question that we would like to ask, right? Because the person who eventually gets COVID is the first person who should get a vaccine. The person who is not likely to get COVID within the next three years, that is the last person to get a vaccine. So this is an open question, and it is a 325 million person grid. We may try to simplify the idea a little bit by grouping people. Well, nurses will probably get it. Well, old people who live alone and don't go outside and have someone to bring them food probably won't. But then, there's a lot of other variables. And if you wanted to do it exactly perfect, where I could look at you and just say, yes, you're in line for a vaccine. No, you should wait. Well, that would use this kind of processing. So it is an unsolved problem. And since it's an unsolved problem, I should probably put this kind of stuff on the test, right? Okay. Now, so let's look at this. Let's do a problem off of this section, the next one. Okay, so let's look at problem 4. Give me a second. Where's my Zoom? Okay, let's share screen. Okay, so you'll start doing homework and it'll ask you, hey, is this a solution? And all you'll do is just plug in the two numbers. And if you get a true and a true, solution. If either of them are false, not a solution. Okay, so you're going to get a bunch of those. Some will be true, some will be a solution, some will not. And then you'll get to something that looks like this. Let me make it smaller. Let me bring it down here. And it says, solve the following system equations by graphing. And then it'll do that second part we did. So go ahead and graph this x plus 5, and go ahead and graph this negative 3x minus 7. And wherever they intersect, that will be your solution. So my y-intercept is 5. So let me write it from here. My slope is 1. Okay, now go ahead and do the other line. Your y-intercept is negative 7. Down 3 over 1. Okay, now did I do this right? Did my jiggle hands get me again? No, that one's not bad. Let's see. Let me try it again. Okay, so this one is going from this point through that point. Yeah. So the point I care about is probably this one right here. So then my solution is and that's it. So you'll draw two lines, you'll tell me where they intersect. And then that'll be your answer. Okay. Now you see this one solution, no solution, infinite number of solutions. I'm going to explain that in a second. Let me get everyone a second to catch up. Okay. All right. So once we do, then in your homework, once we finish these problems, we're going to keep going through. And I think we will get to, so all of these are, hey, just graph it, where do they intersect? Hey, just graph it, where do they intersect? Hey, just graph it, where do they exist? And then there's this match the system equations with its solution set. Okay. So it looks like we're going to finish 4.1. We're just about done. So let's talk about this. Okay. Now, erase this. Let me make sure I got this up. Yeah, I did copy it. Okay. Okay. So let's look at this last little part. How many solutions? Okay. So if I look at most cases, there is one solution. Now there are two other cases. This one has no solutions. Because the lines never intersect. They're parallel. And then you have this situation where you actually have exactly the same line. So you have two lines that are overlapping. Now, let's think about it. That's the same line. If we're just looking at it intuitively, this is the same line, which means that they have to have the same equation. So they'll have something like y is equal to 2x plus 3, y is equal to 2x plus 3. They have the same slope. they have the same y-intercept. Of course they do. They're the same line. And you'll go, Dr. Kawhi, does this happen? You go, all the time. Sometimes when you're working on a problem, you go, I just discovered a statement of fact. And then you'll run it through the program and it'll say infinite solution, and someone will go, no, you just restated something we already knew that's already in the program. You got to come up with something unique. You can't come up with a statement of fact that is the same but with different numbers. So for example, what this would look like is 2x plus 4y is equal to 10, and then 4x plus 8y is equal to 20. See, they're the same statement of fact. You just multiply this by 2. So a lot of times when you're trying to solve a problem, you're trying to find statements of facts, things that are true, and you'll run it and you'll go, sorry, these two are the same. The way you wrote it might have looked different, but they're essentially the same line. So keep working. Okay, let me give everyone a chance to copy. So let's say I have something like this. This is not the same line. They're going the same direction. And the way we measure direction is slope. So they have the same slope. So this will look like something like y is equal to 2x plus 3. Y is equal to 2x plus 7. This right here is the same.
Well, just
Just so you know, every time your kids hit unmute, it makes me happy. It makes me really happy. I had to do this. I learned this way with my kids. I was 40, I went back to school, and you're just trying to defend your homework and knock hands away. I remember going through the exact same thing. So nice to have a little kid that cute and sweet. Okay. Now, this one right here is that the slopes are different direction. So these lines are in different directions. So these will have a different slope. This is the situation that happens most often. Okay. So let's work on this, right? Let me give everyone a chance to copy, but let me put a problem up. Okay, so that's the typical question. The last question on your exam, you'll have something like that. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to convert this into y equal mx plus b. Okay, so let's try it. 4y plus 8x is equal to 7. So we'll bring the 8x to the other side. We have 4y is equal to minus 8x plus 7. And we'll divide both of these by 4. Okay. Now we're going to compare with the other one. Okay. Now look at the slope and figure out how many solutions you have. Okay. So these are different. Oh, which means one solution. Okay. Now, because there's a bunch of you who are really stressed out about the quiz today, I'm going to make 4.1 due on Thursday and give everyone an extra day on that. So let's make sure we're clear on what we're doing. Okay. So quiz is due tomorrow. Okay. 3.4 and 3.5 is due on Wednesday. And section 4.1 will make it due on Thursday. Okay. So there are going to be 4 weeks that are going to be absolutely miserable for you. This is basically what you're doing all the way through. We're going to actually go a little faster because less of it will be review for most people. We're going to start getting to stuff where you're like, oh my God, I totally don't remember this stuff. Okay. So hang in there. Okay. After the 4th week, okay, we're going to go 4 weeks really hard. That 5th week, I'm going to try to open it up so we don't do anything new. So on that 5th week, all we're going to do is review. Because I know a lot of stuff from the beginning of the semester, you're going to forget. So that 4th week, what I'm going to do is review, 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 review. Every day, just review. So if you flunk everything, don't do homework, flunk everything. But if you get 75% on the final, I'll pass you. Okay? Because for a lot of people, we're just like screaming through this material, and it's just hard to get my bearings. And then on that 5th week, I'll tell you, sleep in later. We're going to just get your brain back in working order. We're going to do review every day. We're going to get you less stressed out. And then you're going to take that final. And that final, you have a full 2 hours. It'll be a little bit a slower pace than what I give you the quizzes in the midterm. Okay? So hang in there, everyone. I know this is tough, but hang in there, everyone. Okay? So I'm going to hang out until people stop having questions. And thanks, everyone.
Professor,
Mm-hmm.
I had a question.
Sure.
I'm noticing on the emails that you're posting like every day's like lecture boards.
Yeah.
I have a like an appointment on Friday that I can get out of. If I were to need to step away for an hour, do you do that every day, or is
I do that every day.
Okay.
And then Sandy, the other thing too is that I'm not allowed to record the lectures.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, for that hour, just left a screen recorder on, you could watch the lecture just at home, a
And you
videotape
can
of it.
with your laptop, you can just set it up to record.
Yeah, if are you using Windows or are you using Mac?
A Mac.
So I'm sure if you just Googled screen recorder, there's a screen recorder.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Professor.
Okay, and that's probably the easiest thing for you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
You're welcome.
Professor,
Uh-huh.
if we've already taken the quiz, can we go back to like check things, and in the future, like, can we do that too?
Yeah, you're supposed to be able to go in there and see your answers. Can you not go see your answers?
No, well, I just wanted to make sure because I clicked on it and then I think it said like the quiz is timed, and I wasn't sure if, I don't know, it was gonna mess up what I had already done.
Let's do this. Let's wait until the everyone has turned it in, like tomorrow,
Professor?
and then let's play it. Go ahead. Have you played with it?
Yeah, I have. It still says the assessment's timed, but if you just go through, it will tell you completed, and you can go back and look at your quiz.
You can or cannot?
You can. So it will still pop up with the message, this assessment's timed. Are you sure you want to continue? If you've already taken it, you're fine. Just hit OK, and then it will tell you you've already submitted, and then you can click on a link, and it will take you to your quiz.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have questions?
Professor?
Uh-huh.
I kind of accidentally used the late pass on some of the homework, and I think it showed up as late when I wasn't actually late.
When you turned it on time, it changed. Okay.
Yes.
So what I want you to do is just email me what sections, and I'll fix your score afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, if no one else has questions, I'm going to leave this on, and then you guys can leave as you need to. But thanks, everyone. Hang in there. Good luck on the test.
Thank you, Professor.
Professor?